When I switched from a competitive specialty to a non-competitive specialty, the first way I justified it to myself was by just saying that I was a failure and accepting that I was a failure, which is a method I would recommend if you hate being happy. I was pretty miserable. My whole plan on just being apathetic to myself as a failure wasn't working. So, like someone who's trying to work on themselves, I went to therapy. I was very confident, and I told my therapist that I don't have any of these maladaptive core beliefs on this sheet you've given me. My only problem is that my self-worth is tied to my academics. So we just gotta untie those things and we'll be good to go. And she said, why is your self-worth tied to anything? Then she goes, when you say you want to be good enough, that's good enough for something. You can't just be good enough in a vacuum. Like, yeah, you're right. So what am I trying to be good enough for? Good enough to be a doctor or a surgeon? What were you thinking when you were in college? You'd be good enough if you were a med student? And how'd you feel when you got there? I immediately focused on the next thing, and I thought I wasn't good enough again. Like, well, what if you say replace good enough with worthy? Those are synonyms. I'm fine replacing those two things. Well, is it possible you don't think you're worthy? And I look down, there's a stupid little sheet, and one of the maladaptive core beliefs said, feeling unworthy, which is true. I don't think I'm worthy. Personally, don't believe that I'm worthy. And it's a subconscious, deep belief. It is my worst nightmare that is true. And so instead, I look for things external to me to validate that I am good enough. And because I have a proclivity for school, I landed on that. It's a pretty natural pipeline for people craving praise and academic validation to end up in medicine. The issue wasn't that my self-worth was tied to my grades. It was that my self-worth was tied to anything because I didn't think I was good enough, and that I literally needed to tie it to something outside of myself. Came to that realization and was just like, well, what do I do now? And my therapist and I talked about just affirming to yourself that you are good enough. And it's hard because you don't believe it at first. Like working out, you just kind of do it every day and you start to believe it a little bit. Once I was able to accept those things, I stopped feeling like I was a failure, and I didn't need to be apathetic to my failure to accept that I was going to psychiatry. I could reframe it in a way that made me feel like I was choosing psychiatry, which is so much better than just running away from something that's competitive or running away from your own failures. I could say, this is me. I'm good enough no matter what I do, and I feel like doing this thing, and that was psych.